Chapter 13. They say money is the root of all evil, the cause of all crime. There are others like me, other people wandering around in this half existence, and they're all here because of money. They didn't have any, they had too much. They wanted someone else's, someone wanted theirs, and the result, a life taken. But it won't end there. Chapter 14. Anna. The rabbit is on the top step, its stomach cut neatly open in one continuous careful slice. A gelatinous mass of flesh and guts oozes from within. Glassy eyeballs stare out at the street, above a gaping mouth exposing sharp white teeth. I open my mouth to scream, but there is no air in my lungs, and I take a step back instead, clutching at the coat stand to the side of the front door. I feel the prickle of my milk letting down, the need to feed my baby, an instinctive reaction to danger. I find air. Mark! The words explode from my bullet fast. Mark! Mark! I kept shouting, unable to tear my eyes away from the bloody mess on our threshold. A morning frost has coated the rabbit and his blood in glistening silver, and the effects serve only to make the spectacle more macabre, like a gothic Christmas decoration. Mark! He comes downstairs at something between a walk and a run, stubbing his toe on the bottom step and swearing loudly. What the Jesus! He's wearing nothing but a towel, and he shivers involuntarily as he stands in the open doorway, staring at the steps. Droplets of water cling to the sparse hair on his chest. Who would have done such a horrible thing? I'm crying now, in the post-shock relief that comes with realizing you're safe. Mark looks at me confused. Who? Don't you mean what? A fox, presumably. Good job. It's so cold or it'll be stinking. You think an animal did this? A whole pack across the road and it chooses the outdoor step? I'll get some clothes on, then I'll get rid of it. Something doesn't make sense. I try to work out what, but it slips away from me. Why didn't the fox eat it? Look at all that meat, and I swallowed the nausea that threatens my gullet. The guts. Why kill it then not eat it? That's what they do, isn't it? Urban foxes feed from the bins. They kill for fun. If they get into a hen coop, they slaughter the whole flock, but they won't eat a damn one. I know he's right. Years ago, my father decided to keep geese, penning in a run at the bottom of the garden. I can't have been older than 5 or 6, but I remember pulling my wellies and running to collect the eggs and throw grain into the muddy grass. Despite the geese' Christmas fate, my mother named them, or calling them individually as she rounded them up at a nightfall. Her favourite, and by default therefore mine, was a sprightly bird with grey tips feathered called Piper, while the others would hiss and flap their wings if you got too close. Piper would let my mother feed her by hand. Her docility was her undoing. The fox, so bold he didn't wait for darkness, was deterred by the bad-tempered siblings, but clamped his jaw around poor Piper's neck, leaving her decapitated body for my mother and for me to find that evening. Filthy animals, Mark says. You can see where the fox hunt brigade's coming from, can't you? I can't. I've never seen a fox in the countryside, but I've seen plenty in town, trotting down the centre of the street, as bold as you like. They're so beautiful, I can't imagine terrorizing them in punishment for their own instinct as hunters. As I stare at the mutilated rabbit, I pinpoint what's been troubling me. I speak slowly, the thoughts solidifying along with the words. There's too much blood. There's a pool of it beneath the lifeless rabbit, and more on the 3 steps down to the drive. Gentle amusement shows on Mark's face as he takes in my announcement. I remember dissecting frogs in 4th form biology, but we never did a rabbit. How much blood should there be? The sarcasm irritates me. Why isn't he seeing what I'm seeing? I try to stay calm. Let's suppose a fox did it, and let's suppose there's enough blood in a tiny wild rabbit to produce this mess in front of us. Did it wipe its paws on the other steps? Mark laughs, but I'm not joking. Did it use its tail to paint smears of blood? Because that's what it looks like someone had taken a paintbrush, dipped it in the rabbit, and covered our steps with irregular daubs of blood. It looks, I realise with sudden clarity, like a crime scene. Mark becomes serious. He puts a strong arm around me and uses his free hand to close the door. Then he turns me to face him. Tell me who did this. I don't know who did it, but they did it because I went to the police. They did it because they know something about Mum's death. and they want to stop me finding out about it. Voicing my theory does nothing to make it sound less fantastical. Mark is impassive, although I detect a hint of concern. Sweetheart, this doesn't make sense. You think this is normal? An anonymous card yesterday, and now this? Okay, let's think this through. Suppose the card wasn't something but someone being spiteful. It wasn't. What did they want to achieve by questioning your mother's death? He doesn't wait for me to answer. And what do they want to achieve by scaring you with dead animals on the doorstep? I can see his point. It feels disjointed. Why push me towards the police, then warn me off? It takes my silence as defeat. It was a fox, sweetheart. Mark moves forward and kisses my forehead. I promise. Why don't I take Ella while you have a nice bath? I haven't got a client till 11 today. I let Mark lead me upstairs and run me a bath, putting in some of the ludicrously expensive bath salts he bought me when Ella was born, which I've never had time to use. I soak beneath the bubbles, thinking about foxes, rabbits' blood, wondering if I'm paranoid. I picture the anonymous card, imagine the sender's hand sliding into the envelope, putting it in the postbox. Did that same person cut open a rabbit with surgical precision, smear blood across the steps of my house? My pulse won't slow down. It beats a staccato rhythm in my temple, and I sink lower in the bath, letting the hum of the water fill my ears instead. Someone wants to frighten me. I wonder if the two acts are really that disjointed after all. I saw the anonymous card as a call to action, a direction to look into my mother's death. But what if it wasn't an instruction, but a warning? Think again. A warning that Mum's death wasn't as it seemed, that someone out there meant my family harm, still does. I close my eyes and see blood, so much blood. Already my memory is playing tricks on me. How big was the rabbit? Was there really that much blood? Photographs. The thought occurred suddenly, and I sit up, sloshing water over the side of the bath. I'll take pictures, and then I can take them to Murray Mackenzie at the police station and see if he thinks it could be been a fox. A tiny voice asks if I'm doing this to convince Mark or to convince the police. I bat it away, pull the plug, and hop out, drying myself with such haste my clothes stick to my damp skin. I find my phone and rush downstairs, but Mark has already cleared away the dead rabbit and washed the steps with bleach. When I open the front door, there's nothing there at all. It's as if it never happened. Chapter 15. Murray. Winter sun filters through the bedroom's curtains as Murray got dressed. He tucked the duvet underneath the pillows and smoothed out the wrinkles before arranging the cushions the way Sarah liked. Opening the curtains, he noted the thick grey clouds rolling in from the north and put a V-neck sweater over his shirt. Later, once the dishwasher was on and he'd pushed the hoover around and the first load of laundry was hanging on the line, Murray sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea and a chocolate biscuit. It was 9:30. The hours stretched out in front of him. He remembered a time when a morning off was full of promise, full of expectation. He drummed his fingers on his table. He would go and see Sarah, spend the morning with her. Perhaps he could persuade her to go to the cafe or take a walk around the grounds and go on to work from there. He was buzzed in by Joe Dawkins, Sarah's key worker, who had worked at Highfield for the last 10 years. I'm sorry, love, she's having a bad day. A bad day means Sarah didn't want to see him. Ordinarily, Murray would go straight home, accepting that everyone had times when they wanted to be alone. Today he felt different. He missed Sarah. He wanted to talk about the Johnson job. Would you try again? Tell her I won't stay long. I'll see what I can do. Joe left him in reception, the hall of the original country house. It had been clumsily converted long before listed buildings had become something to protect. Thick fire doors, all with key code access, led off to wards and offices, and ugly wood chip paper covered both walls and ceiling. When Joe returned, it was clear that from her face, nothing had changed. Did she give me any reason? BPD, that was the reason. Joe said, not really. She did, didn't she? Come on, Joe. You know I can take her. The nurse looked him square on and said to him, okay, she thinks you should be. She lifted her hands and made repeated quotes marks in the air, dissociating herself from what was to follow. Fucking other people and not wasting your life loving a loony. Murray blushed. His wife ordered him to leave her and then attempt a suicide at the prospect, and had been a common theme throughout their marriage. but that didn't make it any less awkward to hear by a third party. Would you tell her, he raised his hand to mirror Joe's quote, that loving a loony is exactly what I like best? Murray sat in the car park of Highfield, leaning back against the headrest. He should have known better than to have tried to surprise Sarah. She was unpredictable at the best of times, but predictably so in the mornings. He would try again on his way home from work. So now what? He had 2 hours before his shift started and no desire to go back to an empty house and watch the minutes tick by. The fridge was full, the garden tidy, and the house clean. Murray considered his options. Yes, he said aloud as he was inclined to do. Why not? His time was his own. He could do what he wanted with it. He headed out of town, across the downs, pressing his foot hard against the floor for a burst of speed. He never got on buses. The shortage of parking at the police station meant public transport was often more convenient for work, but Murray enjoyed driving, and he put on the radio and hummed along to a track he only half knew. The threatened rain hadn't yet materialized, but the clouds hung low above the hills, and when the sea hove into view, it flecked with angry white tips. The car park was nearly empty, save half dozen cars, and Murray found 80p among the loose change he kept in the otherwise redundant ashtray and popped the ticket on the dash. A large sign next to the pay and displayed machine gave the contact number for the Samaritans, and as Murray walked towards the coastal path, he passed a series of further signs. It helps to talk. You are not alone. Could a sign make a difference? Might a person hell-bent on suicide stop to take in a message meant for them? You are not alone. For every person who fell to the death of Beachy Head, there are a dozen more who didn't, a dozen more who lost their nerve, had a change of heart, encountered one of the volunteers who patrolled the cliffs, and reluctantly agreed to join them for a cup of tea instead of carrying out their plan. It didn't end there, though, did it? An intervention was a comma, not a full stop. All the tea, all the conversation, all the support in the world might not change what happened the next day or the day after that. Murray thought of the poor chaplain who found Caroline Johnson on the cliff edge, her rucksack weighed down with stones. How must he have felt to learn that the woman he'd talked down from suicide had gone straight back to the same spot and jumped anyway? Had she been with someone that day? Had the chaplain been so focused on saving Caroline's life that he had neglected to see a figure in the shadows keeping well back? Was Anna's mother pushed? Perhaps not physically, but could someone have forced Caroline into taking her own life? The headland rose above Murray, each stride taking him higher above sea level. Local folklore suggested magnificent ley lines converged at Beachy Head, drawing those susceptible to such things to their death. Murray held no truck with magic and mystery, but it was hard to ignore the power of the place. The expanse of grass ended abruptly in bright white cliffs, the contrast muted by the mist that swirled around the lighthouse below. As the cliff shifted, Murray caught glimpses of grey sea, and he felt a rush of vertigo, stepping backwards even though he was 12 feet or more from the crumbling edges. Caroline had come here to die. That much had been clear from the chaplain's testimony, yet the implication in the anonymous anniversary card was clear. Her suicide was not as it seemed. Murray pictured Caroline Johnson standing where he now stood. Had she wanted to die, or been willing to die? There was a subtle but important distinction. Willing to die so that someone else would be spared, her daughter, perhaps Anna herself, was the key to all this. Could Caroline Johnson have taken her own life because someone threatened to hurt her daughter if she hadn't? Far from clearing his head, Beachy Head was sending him around in circles. In the centre of the well-trodden patch of grass was a stone pling, topped with a slab. Murray read the engraving. His lips moved silently. Mightier than the thunders of many waters, mightier than the waves of the sea, the Lord on high is mighty. Beneath the psalm, a final reminder, God is always greater than all of our troubles. Murray felt something well up inside him. He turned abruptly from the plinth, looked one last minute at where the cliffs gave way to oblivion, and then marched back towards the car park. Angry he had let it get to him. He had come for research purposes, he told himself, not to get maudlin. He had come to see where Anna Johnson's parents had died, to fix the scene in his mind, thinking it might have changed since he was last there. It hadn't. had been one of the patrol volunteers who had found Sarah. She'd been sitting on the edge of the cliff, her feet dangling into a biblion. She hadn't wanted to kill herself, she told the chaplain. She just didn't want to be in the world anymore. There was a difference, she insisted. Murray had understood that. He wouldn't change his wife for the world, but he wished so much he could change the world for his wife. Murray had picked up the call, left work, and driven to the pub at Beachy Head, where Sarah was sitting with a woman whose dog collar was all but hidden beneath her waterproofs. The landlord was quiet, thoughtful man, experienced in the difference between a stiff drink and Dutch courage, quick to call the police if the latter looked as though it would end badly. He had retired discreetly to the other end of the pub, while Sarah had cried on Murray's shoulder. Beachy Head hadn't changed. It never would. It would always be a beautiful, haunting, agonizing place, at once uplifting and destroying. Murray parked the car in the street behind the police station, took the time, and took out his access card. A pair of response officers were jogging down the corridor, nodding their thanks as Murray swung open the door for them before getting into a marked car parked in the backyard. Within seconds, they were out of the gate, wheels spinning as they rounded the corner. Murray stood until the sound of the siren had all but disappeared. A barely there smile on his face. There was nothing like a blue light run for getting his blood pumping. The Criminal Investigation Department, or CID, was at the end of a long corridor. In Murray's day, there had been 5 or 6 more officers in each side, but by the time he had retired, most of the internal walls had been demolished to create open plan workspaces. Officers were expected to hot desks now. Murray knew, and he was grateful that the concept hadn't been mooted while he was still in the department. How could you solve a jigsaw puzzle when you had to keep packing away the pieces? Detective Sergeant James Kennedy looked up as Murray entered, his face showing genuine warmth. He shook Murray's hand vigorously. How the devil are you? Still on the front desk? Lower Meads, Nick, isn't it? That's the one. Rather you than me, James shuddered. Soon as I get my pension, I'm out of here. You won't catch me back under the cosh, working Christmas instead of watching the kids open their stocking. It's a mug's game, right? James Kennedy was in his early 30s. He arrived in CID 2 months before Murray's leaving due, and now there he was, leading a team, and no doubt one of the most experienced detectives in the office. He might think his retirement, still years in the future, would never involve a uniform, but wait till he got there, Murray thought. 30 years left a gap that was hard to fill. James took in Murray's civvies. I'm early. In early? You're keen? I was just passing. Thought I'd pop in and see how things were. There was a moment of hesitation while the stark reality of Murray's empty life hung in the air between them before James rallied. Well, I'm glad you did. It's good to see you. I'll put the kettle on. As James clattered around in the corner of the office, where a kettle and tea tray on top of the fridge formed a makeshift kitchen, Murray looked at the ongoing cases on the whiteboard. I see Owen Hill is still outstanding. James put 2 mugs of tea on the desk, the bags still bopping about in them. Murray fished his out and dropped it in the bin by his feet. He always used to run with the Matthew lads when they were kids, lived in the estate behind Wood Green. They're still thick as the proverbial. There was an awkward pause. Oh, right. We'd better check that out then. Good job you swung by. James clapped Murray on the shoulder with enforced joviality, and Murray wished he hadn't said anything. He might be retired, but he still worked for the police. He still heard things, still knew things. He didn't need to be human. People always did, though, not only because he was old, but because, how Sarah? There he was, the head cocked to one side. The thank God it's you and not me look in his eyes. James' wife was at home looking after the 2 children. She wasn't in a mental health unit for the 100th time. James wouldn't be rushing home from work because his wife was nearly in the kitchen with her head in the oven. Murray choked himself. No one knew what went on behind closed doors. She's fine. She'll be home soon. Murray had no idea if that was true. He had long given up asking, instead seeing Sarah's frequent stays at Highfield, whether voluntary or not, as a chance for him to gather his strength to have her back home respite. Actually, while I'm here, I was going to ask you about a job. James looked relieved to be back on more familiar territory. All ears, mate. Your team dealt with a couple of suicides at Beachhead in May and December last year. Tom and Caroline Johnson, husband and wife. She killed herself at the same spot he did. James stood at his desk, drumming his fingers as he tried to press job. Johnson's car, right? That's it. Do you remember much about them? They were identical, copycat suicides, in fact. We were a bit worried it might spark a load more. The papers really went to town on it, but touch wood, it's been quiet on that front. The last jump was a couple of weeks ago. Got blown into the cliffs on the way down. James winced. Anything else strike you as odd? Murray was keen to stay on track. About the Johnsons, in what way? People topping themselves at Beachhead is hardly unusual. I seem to remember the coroner's report being fairly cut and dried. They were. I just thought, how you have a feeling about a job sometimes. Something's not right, as though the truth is hiding in plain sight, but you can't quite get hold of it. Sure, James nodded politely, but there was no spark of recognition. His generation of detectives didn't work on feelings, they worked on facts. Forensics, it wasn't their fault. The courts didn't go on a bundle of intuition either. Murray did. In his experience, if something smelled like fish and tasted like fish, it was almost certainly a fish, even if it didn't look like one. But you don't feel like this about those jobs? Pretty standard stuff, mate. They were in and out of the office within a couple of weeks each time. He leaned forward and lowered his voice, even though there was no one else in the office. Not exactly taxing stuff for COD, am I right? Murray smiled politely. He supposed an open and shut suicide didn't present much of a challenge to a team of hungry detectives with an array of rapes and robberies on their desks. It had been different for Murray. His motivation had been people, not crimes, victims, witnesses, even offenders. That all fascinated him. He had still felt compelled to investigate the mysteries in their lives. How he wished he had been sitting at James' desk when the Johnson suicide had come in. Murray stirred himself. I better get off. Things to do, people to see, right? James clapped him on the shoulder again. Why the interest in the Johnsons? That was the point at which Murray showed him Anna's Johnson's anonymous card, the point at which he should, after he hand over the job to COD and go back to his front desk job. Murray looked at the list of jobs on the whiteboard, at the piles of ongoing files in each detective's desk. Would James prioritise this one, a job with no clear answers handed to him by a retired cop? No reason, Murray said, before he probably thought it through. Idle curiosity. I saw the name on an old briefing sheet. I thought I bought a car from them a few years ago. Right, cool. James' eyes flickered to screen. I'll let you go. Have a good Christmas. Anna Johnson was vulnerable. In a little over a year, she'd lost both her parents and had a baby. She felt threatened and confused. And if this job was going to be investigated, then it needed to be done properly, not given a cursory glance before being filed again. Great to see you, mate. Keep up the good work. James half stood as Murray left the office. He was back in his seat before the older men had reached the door, Johnson's case already forgotten. Murray would quietly investigate Caroline Johnson's death, and the moment he had concrete evidence of the foul play, he'd come back to D.S. Kennedy. Until then, he was on his own.